Welcome to The Ripple, where extraordinary women executives share their turning points, growing pains, breakthroughs, and triumphs to help you show up with confidence. I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, and today we're joined by the insightful Janice Gordon. She's the founder of Scale Your Sales. She's also the co-author of Heels to Deals: How Women Are Dominating Business-to-Business Sales. And she's listed among the top 50 global thought leaders on customer experience. Today, she joins us to share why empathy is the next big revolution in sales and how it shaped her career. Thank you so much for being with us, Janice. We're really pleased to have you.
It's wonderful being here. Can't wait to get into this.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to start by talking a little bit about your work because you help companies find their competitive edge through sales and buyer experience. So, what were you noticing in the industry that you wanted to change?
When I started in sales, I worked in sales for about 10 years, and I've been taught sales in a particular way, which was very much about pushing sales. It was in financial services. You did the fact find. Through the fact find, you agitated the problem to make it uncomfortable enough so that your buyer, your customer wanted your solution. And the fact find became the justification for your solution. And for many years, and still even now to a certain extent, that's what we're doing. And I then left sales and started working in customer experience. And it was literally a light bulb moment. I thought, oh my God, in sales, we've got it all wrong. It should be pulling from the customer point of view, not pushing. And the interesting thing is that the kind of world has caught up with the advent of the internet, and there's so much information online. Customers and buyers don't need sellers to push and to give them information. They can get that information themselves. So when I had this light bulb moment was very much kind of 2022, 2024, when I worked in the customer experience. The light bulb was that your customers are your best innovators and creators.
I love that insight. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so when I worked in customer experience, we had to do these customer journeys. So we'd go into these large companies and they were trialing a product, service, a solution. So we'd give their customers this product and solution, or a journey to go through if it was, like a online service or product. So they had to complete these tasks, and we would watch them and ask them about their experience and all of that. And often you would find that these solutions are more or less complete. So the tech team would design them, very proud of them. They do this testing, and really the tech team, the marketing team, because they're ready to push the button, or it was already out there and they just wanted a minor improvement, the customers would always find the shortest route that the tech team didn't design. They'd always break it. They would completely break it. They'd rip it apart. Why doesn't it do this? If it did this, it would be better, and all of that. If you just add this bit onto it, we could do that with it and whatever. So customers are your best innovators and creators. And so it got me thinking about my sales experience, where we would assume we knew everything. So they would push the information to the customer and make them buy, not make them, but, make them want our solution by kind of identifying the problems and agitating it. And I just thought, we need to do 180 rather than thinking we have all the information. I remember this was kind of 2006. So really before the explosion of the internet, where we now know the customer has all the information. So but at that time, I was really thinking that how do we help the buyers to get to where they already want to go? So wouldn't it be better if we co-created with them? Wouldn't that be amazing if we collaborated with them? And it was very much thinking about, what if we did it in another way? And this is where Scale Your Sales was born.
Oh, that's so exciting. Those were exactly the words I was thinking of when you were telling your story. Is being in the customer experience side seemed so much more collaborative and co-creative. And it's really exciting, the idea of bringing that into the sales experience, especially because you're right, the B2B, especially the B2B sales experience, is so self-service now. and the advent of all of this content that we have available in various forms. So, was there a particular moment in your experience that motivated you to rise to the challenge of creating that change?
I think even when I was selling, there was this, kind of key feeling in myself as well. So I think there was already that gap, and it's just I found just a way of thinking, a mindset, an understanding of really what we needed to do. So when things you, I believe you're always everything you learn is meant to take you to a certain place. And you look back and you think, I knew there was a gap there, and here has given me the solution to that. And I think, that's really what it was. It just fell into place for me. And that from that point in time, it really became my mission. Now, at the time, I was a bit of a lonely voice talking about, selling from the customer's experience, speaking the customer's language. Yeah, and like you think you go into these traditional sales teams and it's like, what? What are you talking about, really? What's the customer got to do with this? And so,
That's such a crazy question.
yeah, exactly. Or also now going into organizations and, you talk about customer centricity and, how customer centric, and they say, yes, all of them will say, yes, we are. We think about the customer, but when you really start to investigate the way they do things, and even when in the language that we're still using in sales, when we talk about customer, winning deals, targets, leads, prospects, these are people. These are people that are putting food on our table. These are people, and people are all about relationships, but the language that we use in sales, I mean, targets and killing and are you killing it and all of that. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's disrespectful, not only to our customers, but within our teams. And we need to start using a different language where we're actually not on opposing teams, which is what this language is telling us. We're actually on the same team. And that's when we get more into a collaborative culture. So, I would challenge how customer centric are you from the top all the way down in the language you use and the processes you have and the way that you test it, in the feedback loops that you have and the teams that you have. Really, what is their motives? And if your motive isn't to provide the best experience for your customer's customer, because there's a user always at the end of that, and your customers are trying to make sure that they can sell better to their customers. So if you, as a supplier, are thinking about their customers as well, then you're onto a winning team there.
I think something that's really powerful that you're talking about is re-examining the idea of what it means to be customer centric, because I think most companies believe that they are by virtue of having a product that serves a need. But when we think about our customer, like I come from the marketing world, so we deal with this all the time, where our idea of the customer is a persona. It's a static profile that we've assessed through some research or maybe even just through some assumptions. Maybe there's no data behind it, qualitative, quantitative, or otherwise. We just look at this piece of paper and decide that's our customer, and now we know what they need. And every time we talk to a customer, we're just we're projecting that persona onto them instead of really hearing them, right? And what you're saying is that we really need to hear people and have a much more dynamic two-way relationship if we're going to consider ourselves to be customer centric. Is that right?
Absolutely. And then think about it, we're not sitting on the opposite side of the table, we're sitting next to them. We're really trying to understand their need, not only where their need is now, but where their need is in 5 years' time. Because if you think of the 80-20 rule, 20% of your customers provide 8% of your revenue, but actually 5% of that 20% will be the 20% of your best customers in the future. So you already have the winning deals, not only for now, but in the future. So often, we don't really understand our customers deeply enough. We don't delve into their world nearly enough to understand. Now, actually, what you don't need or thousands and thousands of customers. And if you've got them, you really need to think about, I'm talking about B2B where, deals are a lot bigger. But, like actually you can afford to cull a lot of your customers and use that time and invest that into your top customers. So often I go into organizations, they don't know who their key customers are. They haven't really segmented them. They speak the same language to every, coming from the marketing team. We're not personalizing it enough. But, like the other revelation that I had when I was delivering a scale your sales framework strategies to enterprising revenue generating organizations was that the potential there was to 10 times the impact in higher win rates, larger deals, shorter sales cycles, a key account strategy, having a strategy to move your customers to co-creation and partnership. So that is a 10 times possibility, right? But what was happening is I was getting 2 times. And what I realized was that they didn't have the right people in the right seats on the sales, marketing team. It wasn't properly aligned. The whole revenue generating organization wasn't really future fit. So I may give them these strategies, but actually, unless they're able to deliver them, they have the competencies within the team. So I'm added a kind of another aspect. And then this is a database that's been going for over 30 years of assessment. So we know what great looks like for, every sector, on the globe. And it's really about understanding who you have in the organization to do the role. What is their competencies? And those that have great competencies, you actually get the coaching notes to actually make them even better. So it's all very well us wanting to understand our customers better than they understand themselves and do all that research. But what I've realized is that organizations, revenue generating organizations, aren't understanding the personnel within their organization nearly enough. And really, it's about providing that information, that data-informed information. Do you have the right people in the right seat? That from leadership all the way down to customer success and support, right people in the right seat. Do you have a co-creating organization? How can you co-create outside if you're not doing that inside? So it's really about having the right people in the right seats and the right culture. And that has got to be led and championed from the CEO down to really support the sales leader in delivering this as a future-focused revenue-generating organization.
I'm really curious. You have this very strong point of view about how sales and buyer experience needs to change. What made you decide that this was a challenge that was best for you to take on in your own venture versus leading that within the organizations that you worked for?
Do you know when you're a consultant, you come in, people want to listen to you because they're paying you. And they say, "Oh, give me what you've got then. Let me see if you can do any different." You can be in an organization, you might often, I found this, I've done my MBA, you often have someone in the organization that absolutely is aligned with what you're saying, and they've been saying it and saying it and saying it, and it doesn't get through. So, you can impact much more change because you're not involved in the culture, in the politics, in the organization. And you have a limited time in order to get the results done. And I can say things around the table and be brutally honest that perhaps someone else in the organization that won't get promoted will not be able to say. And I've got, all of the experience that I can bring from other organizations, all of the articles and the interviews that I do on my podcast, Scale Your Sales with, top sales execs, all of that knowledge and experience that I'm bringing together. But actually, I can back it up because I've got all of that outside experience and data to actually back it all up.
I'm really curious for our listeners, so many of whom are also women leaders in their organizations and founders like you. I'm curious what your advice is to them. What's the number one thing they can do to build a more co-creative environment?
Okay, so for the women leaders out there, I talk a lot about women in leadership, women in sales, and campaigned on that for an awful long time. I have a good 60% of women that I interview on Scale Your Sales podcasts that are really kind of pushing ahead. And so what I would say, and what I often say when I go out and I talk to panels, and you have a lot of women in the audience that SDRs and come up to me and share some of the terrible experiences that they're still happening. What I say, if you're not in an organization that isn't supporting you, then really you need to save your confidence, because that's where it gets knocked, and leave that organization and go to an organization that really values your skill. Women are the best sellers out there. They're not really numbers focused. I mean, of course, they want to, they're at the top of their game, but it's not about the numbers. It's actually about doing a really good job for their customers and understanding the customers and speaking their language and, being really human in the sales, the way that they sell. So they're really good at sales. And so you need to be an organization that's going to support you. So that's what I often say to them. If you're not in the right organization, there are plenty others out there. And now we can build our own brand. We can get out there on LinkedIn and we can talk about our perspective. And, you've really got to invest in your own brand. And if you're not getting training within the organization, there's lots of training you can get out of the organization. In terms of collaboration, you may be the only one. And this is not just women, but ethnic minorities. You may be the only one. You have got to co-collaborate and network outside of the organization. There are enough organizations now, so you really need to make sure that you do the work, your own career development. Decide what your path is, talk to as many people as possible, network and co-collaborate with as many people outside the organization as well as inside the organization. Make sure you've got a champion, make sure you've got a sponsor, make sure you're clear about what you really want.
That's such powerful advice, because I think so many of us feel a responsibility to create the environment we want to be in. And sometimes you're just not in the right place to do that. Sometimes you're just not the right organization. And sometimes that means leaving. Sometimes that means creating a network or a co-collaborative space outside of where you work. So I think that's such a powerful reminder. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your point of view, and advice that I think so many of our listeners will appreciate and receive a lot of value from. Thank you so much, Janice.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Before we end the episode, we want to take a moment to reflect with you, our ambitious listeners, about what Janice's story means to you. How can you invite more co-creation into your work and your life? And how can your organization's internal culture more closely parallel its customer relationships? If today's show inspired you, tell us. Send an email or voice memo to hello@wednesdaywomen.org. Or keep the ripple going by giving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your ratings help us grow and inspire even more people. This podcast is brought to you by Wednesday Women, an organization dedicated to increasing the visibility of women executive leaders. Learn more at wednesdaywomen.org. Thank you to our executive producers, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood. Again, I'm your host, Ashley Lobbs, hoping you'll keep the ripple going. Until next time.